Næstur á dagskrá Dr. Pål Molander, en hann forstjóri norsku vinnuumhverfisstofnunarinnar sem rannsóknarstofnun og þekkingarsetur á sviði vinnuverndar. Molander einn helsti sérfræðingur Norðurlandanna á þessu sviði. Hann hefur jafnframt starfað sem prófessor við Osloar háskóla og tekið þátt í fjölda verkefna á sviði vinnuverndar í Noregi og á alþjóðavísu. Molander flytur framlag sitt á ensku og nefnir það Work Environment, Safety and Health in Norway, Drivers of Change in Shifting Work Life. Getur þú aðstofa mig með gjörðu svo vel? Já. Takk.
Which one you had?
None of these, actually.
Molander here.
Yeah, there, okay. There, yes. Yes, thank you. And thank you for the invitation to come and give a talk here. It's what we usually do a lot in Norway also, to talk with the social partners. I've had the pleasure of collaborating a lot with Kristin and Torun you have here under the Nordic Council of Ministers, and you are happy. It's very good for you that you have so much competence within the authorities in Iceland as a support for your work. It's really competent people you have there. I'm not going to talk much about the hard outcomes or the injuries or anything today, as we usually do. I would like to take a look at what we observe in Norway and try to look at it on the societal level and try to combine it with the major drivers of change we see in Norway, also with regard to the economical situation. The big picture in Norway was quite bright until a couple of years ago. We had a very strong and growing economy. We were not influenced almost at all by the financial crisis about 10 years ago. We have had low unemployment numbers, also among young people. High degree of work-life participation compared to other countries, also in the Nordic countries, and also a high degree of women and young people in the work life. And also, relatively speaking, high and increasing retirement age on top of Europe as well. And we had a lack of workforce, as you have now these days in Iceland, and we have needed import of foreign workers. One thing that has been positive for a long time is that we have had an oil-driven economy, and that's important for the national income. About 50% of our export is regarded to oil, and fishery is also important. And also the oil business has supported also innovation and innovation in other sectors in Norway. But it's also make a pressure on salaries, and also we have the lack of recruitment to other occupations due to that the oil sector has sort of sucked up everything, so to say. But the last 2 years, we've had at least a kind of economical depression in the petroleum industry due to a brutal lowerance of the oil barrel price, and a decrease from $110 to the lowest $30 1 year ago. Now it's stable around 50 or a little bit higher, but it's been dramatical for us. And we have had increased unemployment and downsizing, and also influencing on the labor market in general, but especially in the western part of the country. But now we have recent signs of recovery, but that's sort of the background. And in Norway, we had this fantastic system when we found oil in the early 70s. We made this deal with all the operators that the major fractions from the value of the oil comes back directly to the country. And we have made this big future pension fund invested in a lot of different industries, and also in buildings and enterprises in Europe for future pension needs, because we have a very vulnerable pension system. If you look at Norway today, as I said, there have been some dark clouds, but if you look at statistics for major outlines in Europe, we see that Norway and also the other Nordic countries comes out very high. This is from 2016, where we were rated among the happiest people in the world, along with the Icelandic population. In 2017, we have climbed to number 1 again, and we usually have been there. So Denmark is down. But I see that you are quite happy in Iceland these days. It was a little bit another atmosphere when I was there last time. In Norway also we stand out with high degree of gender equality, which also has implications on how we have structures over work life. These are sort of things that recognizes also other Nordic countries, so I have to say that. We also are on the top on international benchmarking on human decency. That's because we have a high degree of trust, also important in other Nordic countries. And it's also quite good to do businesses in Norway. Sometimes the trade unions say that it's important to do business, but it's quite business friendly as well as compared to other countries. So we have quite much to be proud of in the Nordic countries. And we also are on the top on labor productivity. Many people say that this is due to the oil, but the oil is quite a small fraction. The biggest impact here, as we probably share with Iceland now, is the high degree of work-life participation. We have high number of people in the work life, and that's very important for the economy. So and we have a very strong productivity, but we are sort of worried that the productivity is not increasing as much as it used to do, and in other countries it increases faster, which means that we are a little bit worried about the productivity, and we need to increase our productivity. This is the former Norwegian Minister of Labor, and based on numbers from statistics from my institute, we also claim that we are world leading in the work environment, along with the other Nordic countries. So many signs are pointing in the right direction, and maybe we could say that that it's no more use for focusing on work environment. Maybe I have settled everything, and we should focus on other areas in this field of work. And many people tend to think that we take things maybe for granted. And I think it's time to be aware of that, because we are now entering a phase where the work life is changing quite dramatically. There are two major characteristics about the Norwegian work life, which also is similar in the other parts of Northern Europe, especially in the Nordic countries. We have a high degree of work-life participation, as I said, which means that we also have inclusion of workers with slightly reduced working capacity or capabilities. That certainly influences on the work environment and how we arrange our work. That's sort of the drawback of having a high work-life participation. Then more vulnerable people are entering the work life. At the other end, we have to be aware that we are a high-cost country, which means that if we are able to compete at all, we need to have high demands in our work life. And on international benchmarking, we see that the productivity, the efficiency, the demands in the Norwegian work life, also in other Nordic countries, are very high. We need to work harder, actually, be more efficient, with a more vulnerable work stock. That sort of puts some responsibilities to us on how we arrange our work life. And in the Nordic countries and in Norway also, we solve that by having higher degrees of autonomy in the work. So you have more influence as a worker on the work that are proceeded, which means that you have a higher work engagement, etc., than in many other countries where the manager decides everything. And that is sort of one of the drivers for having sustainable high demands, and that is important and also influence on work environments. There are also some other changes around us that we share with you. We have an international technological shift, a paradigm shift. It's lots of new technology entering, artificial intelligence, digitalization, robotization, which probably will change the way we are working quite dramatically in many occupations. Not as fast as the gründers think claim to do, but quite fast at least. And it will maybe be at least a short-time reduced workforce, and we'll also have new ways of organization and ways of affiliation, which is very important discussions between the social partners in Norway these days, because we are entering a more tendency to have precarious work, or also more tendency to have self-employment, temporary work, and also freelancing, with reduction of worker rights, for instance. We also had a high degree of work-life criminality that has basically been due to the high need for foreign workers, which you also should be aware of. It's been a dramatic shift with new culture, especially from foreign companies, where we have a pressure on the serious work life that takes the responsibilities. That is a big problem in Norway, and the Work Inspection Authority in Norway spends more than 50% on work-life criminality as compared to more preventive actions. We have internationalization and mobility, lots of people moving around. We have also had the depression in the oil industry, and we will also need to shift away from the oil industry due to the green shift and more carbon neutral industries, which will be a challenge for Norway because we have this high degree of oil dependency. And we also have refugees influx waves and challenges in getting them into the work life, because our productivity is based on high work life participation, as I said. And in Norway, we have very high sickness absence numbers and also high disability numbers. We are world leading in work-life participation, but we have a high degree still of disability pension, and also have a higher degree of sickness absence than in many other countries. And at least it's too high when we degree to the general health situation. Someone claimed that is due to to how we compensate sickness absence, where actually the state pays everything, also with regard to disability. So the companies pays only for the first 12 days, and then it's fully compensated from day 13 by the state government. And we also have a non-sustainable pension system. That's why we put all our oil money into that fund. And the replies to the Norwegian challenges in general is that we need to increase efficiency and productivity. We need to reduce the oil dependency, and we also need to increase the labor market participation from a world-leading position, which means that this is quite challenging. And there are sort of cut-off with regard to vulnerability and efficiency of certain people in order how they are prepared to enter the work life. And we need to do that in order to preserve our sustainable welfare system, which sickness absence payment also is a part of. And we need to increase the retirement age further in order to have a sustainable pension system, and also lower the sickness absence, disability pension, and exclusion from work life. We also have a slightly increased fraction of young people with psychological disorders that don't enter the work life at all. And of course, how we arrange the work life, which is actually the work environment aspects, are very important in order to solve this problem. So this is a white paper from the government, the Ministry of Finance, that came earlier this spring, which shows quite clearly that we have to increase efficiency in the work life in order to have a sustainable welfare system. That's very important. And we have to move away from oil because of the green shift. We need to grow more businesses, and we have a lot of good new businesses growing up based on the technology that has been world leading in the oil business. We have a lot of good engineering companies who are now using the competence to develop new technology in other branches. But you see here the footprint of the oil on the economy in Norway. And we have a growing population and an elderly population, and here you see some prospects of what will happen at the number of persons above 66 per 10 persons that sort of are the working population that will finance them in the future when they are pensioners. And you see that in 1970 it was 2, and then in 2060 it will be doubled. So we need to have people in order to work longer, otherwise the pension system will collapse. That is a challenge that we share with all European countries, and it's very important. And of course, work environment factors are extremely important in order to achieve that goal. And the labor market position, how can we increase the labor market situation if half of the jobs today are going to be replaced within 20 years and the robots are taking over on one hand, and also with the OECD numbers on the other side, where you see the full line that is at the right there at the top, where you see we have an increasing number of persons on disability pensions in Norway. When we have high demands, of course, vulnerable people also will have troubles with meeting those demands if we need to have high efficiency. So that are sort of conflicting goals, and we need to tackle them. And one of the few knots that we can twist is work environment factors. So that's where we can adjust things. But there are some good news as well. If you look at all the technological shift, everyone is talking about robotization, digitalization, etc., which means that jobs will disappear. But there are growing a lot of other interesting industries with equal paradigm shifts. For instance, in the energy sector, in the biotech sector, also in advanced materials, where we are in front, also in research. So we will most probably develop new, very sustainable industry lines in the future. So we think that people will have work. And that's very important. A society without work is not very good. If you look at the demands in the Nordic countries and in Norway, this is the European Working Conditions Service, last time that was took up, we see that the demands in Norway here and also in Sweden, for instance, there are high demands, which is efficient, of course, but we balance that with the high degree of autonomy, and that's the sort of the Nordic model, where the workers have influence on the work and how they proceed their work within the limitations set by the employer. And we have more ways of doing that, which means that we can put demand in a very sustainable and healthy way, because this is an active work presentation which actually gives health. And that is important. And this is a Dane who is the leader of the director general of the CEO of the largest brewery in Norway. Has a lot of international positions. He said that Norwegians are the most efficient workers I ever met. He has never worked in Iceland, so probably the Iceland I know that is very efficient. Here you usually have 2 jobs, right? so you are extremely efficient. And then you also must have a good work environment. Otherwise, it's not sustainable at all in the long run. So for you, it's extremely important to focus on these things. And the Norwegian solution, politically, how are we dealing with these things in Norway? And we have made the agreement of inclusive work life. That's a big political agreement. Actually, this is how we are preserving the sickness absence system in Norway with a high degree of governmental funding there. And then the state has claimed something back, and but it is a voluntary tripartite national political agreement, and should be integrated in the regular work environment work you do. And we have a specific goal for improved work environment, reduced sickness absent numbers, it should be reduced. We will have increased employment factors for workers with reduced physical and psychological capabilities, so it's inclusion, and also prolonged working careers. And it was established in 2001, and we have prolonged it 3 times, and we are going to negotiate for a new agreement maybe next year. And do you think we have had wonderful results? We haven't really obtained very much. And it's big discussions around how we use our resources within this field. We have a slight, at least, stabilized the sickness absent numbers and a little bit reduction. We have increased in the retirement age quite much, actually, but that is basically due to a reform with regard to that it's good money in working longer, not due to the effects of this agreement. So we haven't had really good results, and when we have evaluated it the last degree, midterm evaluation, the social partners have decided that we need to work more on work environment factors, preventative factors, in order to obtain all the goals. That is where we have sort of missed the goals. So we don't focus on it in a proper way. And I think that in Norway at least, we think that work environment probably will become more important in the near future due to all the changes. And the special situation in Norway calls for interest in this field. And we are, along with all the Nordic countries, world leading in work environment, but still 1/3 of the working population, there are not good collaboration between the manager and the employee. And also it's an increment in repetitive work, which is also not, it's a risk factor for lower job engagement, etc. And if you look at the sickness absence number, and the people that have a long-term sickness absence, more than 14 days in a row last year, almost 40% claim that their sickness absence is related to work environment factors. That is probably too high due to attributional factors. I'm not going into that, but at least we say that it's between 15 and 40%, and it's large differences between occupations, between branches, between enterprises, and also between different parts of the enterprises, because it's related to the work situation at every workplace. We have been discussing sickness absence for a very long time in Norway, and also disability. And sickness absence in Norway, it's sort of the port to disability. If you have a long-term sickness absence, then usually it ends out in a disability not far away. And we have a lot of drivers for sickness absence, and we have had this big debate on how should we handle these things. And if you look at all the drivers, for instance, gender issues, we have spent a lot of research on gender issues, but is it? We haven't found any conclusions on how to deal with it, and it's not possible to shift gender in a way to reduce sickness absence, although it's medically possible. So it's not a good idea. I don't recommend that. Also, it's a lot of social causes and heritage, etc. But you sort of, these are things that need structural reforms that need to work for a long time. You should start actually back in school. Health, public health, for instance, we have spent 50 years stopping smoking. It will take a long time, but we haven't really discussed the fruits that are the lower part of the tree that you can pick down easy, and that is the preventive work environment, which sort of is already very efficient for the social partners to work with on every workplace. And then we need a discussion on what is work environment. And if you ask a Norwegian worker, what is work environment, you will get a lot of different answers. And a lot of people will talk about welfare and the cake on Fridays after lunch and wine lotteries and all the things that really doesn't matter. It's sort of, very friendly, and it's a sort of by-effect of a good work environment, but they don't talk about what it's really about, and it's about the work and how the work is done. So it's sort of difficult to improve things if you don't have a common idea on what it's all about. And then we also miss on maybe on the action points, because this is where we have divided the work population into three parts. We have the ones who are sick, on sick leave, all the other ones, and the extremely healthy ones who is training and really capable and fit. And if you look at the expenses for the enterprises, of course, it's lots of costs related to this one, because that one is covered by the state in Norway. When we're out, it's the state, as I said. And then it's sort of declining quite much. But if you look at the action points that we are using in the work environment work, we see that we spend a lot of those on short-term sickness absence. And then when we enter these ones, which really is the critical ones that are sort of vulnerable to entering these fates, then it's a drop, and then we spend a lot of action points on things that really, from science, don't work at all, but it's popular, and especially it's popular among the healthiest ones. And then you can sort of ask yourself, is it an optimal overlap? And the most common trap is the individual targeted action points. We tend to spend money on making people physically capable of doing the work instead of looking at how we arrange the work. We send people to an increasing degree on mindfulness courses, for instance. I have nothing against mindfulness, but I think it's a better idea to look at how the work is organized in order to prevent stress there, rather than hoping for the workers to be more capable of handling stress, for instance. And we do a lot of that, and it's a lot of information also in the science. Here is a paper from our Danish friends that says that job satisfaction is more than a fruit basket, health checks, and free exercise. And we see that in Norway, it's much more, in the Nordic countries, it's much more important that we focus on the work factors, and especially on relational work factors. And we have a lot of knowledge about what works. We have this long list. I'm not going to go deep into it, but this is very easily available for everyone, for every company to deal with. But of course, we have difficulties in translating, for instance, what is a role conflict down on the floor on each enterprise. We need to have more focus on what does that mean for on the enterprise level. And we have sort of understood in Norway that we need to work on those topics. And if you look at the consequences if you're not aiming good enough, which we certainly haven't done in Norway, although we are world leading, but it's still much to work on, especially in a changing work life. And we have done this report on what are the costs regard to work-related sickness and injuries. And we see that we at least spend $30 billion Norwegian crowns a year on losses. That number is far too low because it has not been taking into account the losses on the enterprise level. And this is research from Sweden, economic health research, where they say that in general you lose 38% of the efficiency if on individual level if a worker have a problem on the work. So it's a really loss. And we have sort of been focusing on work environment that you lose all the money, but now these days it has become better. It's appeared better and better research that also work environment is beneficial from a cost point. You can actually earn money also as well. So instead of losing them, you can also gain money and realize wins. And this is some research from that point where we see that you have 220% payback for investments in work environment cost. It's a big European investigation. And this is a very small one from Canada in a manufacturing fabric where they improved ergonomics in the production line, and they got a gain of 5.5. And people tend to think that that is reduction in sickness, absence, and so on, but it's really not at all. The gain is in increased production. So this is really linked to the core business of the company and also to the result and the productivity. But it was a work environment action because the work environment is related to the core production. And what we have learned in Norway is that we has this group under the IA agreement, as I said, between the social partners, and I've also been taking part of that group, and we sort of need to give ourselves a kick in the back, and we have sort of tried to make a new narrative for work environment where we clearly state that work environment is about the work. It's related to how the work is organized, planned, and implemented. It is different between workplaces and thus needs different approaches, and it influences on workers' health, but also on the job and engagement and on the results of the company. And this is really what work environment should be about. And in Norway also we had this discussion going on for a long time that work is healthy. Everyone claims that work is healthy. But of course it's also the most healthy people that are working. And we don't have any good international studies that work itself is healthy because you have this skewness in the data in. And this is a study that I think is very relevant because you also need to increase your retirement age in Iceland. And here in France, they followed people 7 years before and 7 years after retirement. And they divided it into two groups, those people with bad work environment and those with good work environment. And you see that the people with good work environment, they preserve their health. This is the health scale to the retirement and into the retirement. So they don't get improved health, but of course they're getting elder as well, they preserve it. But those, they suffer from poor health due to the retirement age because they have also a bad work environment, and the demands are stable, but their capability is reduced with age. And suddenly, when they stop working, they get improved health. So it's safe to say that work is healthy only if the work environment is good. And that is an important take-home message. And the simple solution for any workplace, it's critical examination of the work procedures and the organization, and it's based on risk assessment, identification of relevant work challenges, identification of knowledge-based targeted measures and action points. I mentioned training in the work time. Training is very good. Everyone knows that. It also has effect. In Norway, it's a tendency that businesses give everyone 1 hour off each week in order to train. And we think that reduces the sickness absence. But it don't at all, because those who take advantage of that offer is the healthiest one. And those that maybe could have had impact from such an offer, they don't use it, and also 1 hour is too little. So we spend it on not knowledge-based targeted measures and hope it works. But we don't aim at those who really need it, and those are suffering from falling out of work life. And it needs to be systematic and continuous implemented. And then, to conclude, work environment is a Norwegian and Nordic business advantage. It increases efficiency and productivity, and that is needed to be culminated stronger. We have a sustainability of a large working population, and also the work environment influences on that, and it should be preserved and further developed in the future work life. And we must focus on the right things, as I said, knowledge-based surveillance and actions, and work life is changing quickly at the moment, and new work environment challenges will appear. The majority of the old ones will hang in there, old exposure will appear in new disguises, and we must develop work environment knowledge along with the technological shifts and work-life changes. So just one piece of advice to the Icelandic population when you are to focus on improvements in work environment for the future, stay curious. Thank you.
Nú hljóta að brenna á okkur margar spurningar. Einhver?
Hi, I'm Oddrún Lilja, Health and Safety Manager at Coca-Cola in Iceland. I am very interested in ergonomics, and you talked about the low-hanging fruit in the preventive work. How is, when you are designing a new working environment, and we know a lot about what affects our health, and have you any regulations or something in Norway that helps us doing making a working environment good from the start?
Actually, what we are discussing now in Norway is not on the regulation side at all. The regulations are more general, but we want to sort of make sure that these discussions are taking place at each workplace and that they not do this formal way of risk assessments, etc., and make this big portion of documents, etc. We want to have it as a more fruitful discussion where they are more aware of what they are good in and what are the challenges, and that we will try to make them more capable of doing that. And I thought of those things that we were better on in the 70s, we have missed a little bit on the way, maybe due to too strong focus on the regulations. Regulations is important. Work Environment Authority is important, but we need to have it more easy on the workplace, and also we need to shorter the distance from research and knowledge and our way of talking, and for instance the example with role conflicts, and take it down on what does that matter on each workplace.
And also it's a big opportunity in the designing phase to make the working environment good.
Yeah. So the experts really are the one who is having the shoes on.
Einhverja fleiri spurningar? Já, Halldór?
You mentioned the social dialogue and the agreement between the social partners in Norway. Hopefully it will turn out well, although we don't know what will happen yet. But I was just wondering, have this dialogue and the agreement led to a more consciousness among workers and employers when it comes to work environments, or is this somewhere else? That's sometimes the problem. We have a general discussion, the politics, the social partners, but when it comes to the workplace, it doesn't seem to go there.
One thing that has been really fruitful with the agreement is that we have sort of had a changed culture in a way that it's now decent to discuss more the reason for sickness absence. It is more in a formal way, but still in an informal low level. And we didn't have that before. It was sort of inappropriate to talk about those things before. No, that's a really big gain. So we have a better culture, but when it comes to the hard numbers and the achievements that we should have a lower in that and lower in that, we haven't really gained as much as we have hoped for. But it's certainly been a cultural success, and it's also a basis for how we now discuss work environment issues in Norway. The big drawback is that it's basically the larger companies with researchers on both the worker and both social partners that are implemented, and we have a lot of small and medium-sized businesses in Norway who is not a part of the agreement, but they sort of have it the side effects downstream anyway.
So are there more part-time jobs now than there were before?
That is sort of an international trend, but our government, who is now is on the right side, they opened for more part-time work last year, and that was due to their desire for lowering the possibilities for disabled people to enter the work life and to have a chance, while the left-hand side don't look up on that in the same way, and means that it's a sort of more flexibility for the employer side. So that is how the discussion is going. Probably the same here, I would assume. But it will be pressure on those because of the new ways of working again, the gig economy, platform economies, etc., the internationalization.
Thank you very much for a very interesting lecture. My name is Dóra Hjálmarsdóttir and I work as an HSE consultant at Verkís. And I was wondering if you had any good suggestions. You showed us the graph of the overlap.
Yeah.
Where our focus wasn't quite right. You have any good suggestions how to reach that group? And have you an idea how this group is put together? Are these more the low-income jobs, or are they just all over the companies, these people that we are not reaching with our efficient means?
In Norway, they are in all sectors, and it's not the old blue-collar workers I'm talking about. It's in all sectors, and you have that's a side effect, as I said, of having a large work population. Some people are more vulnerable, and I think that those people at stake there, then we must put efforts into the dialogue on the lowest level. We have to have influence, and also for all people to influence on how that dialogue should work on the lowest level, where you have the strongest possibilities to also observe and identify what are the work environment factors here that is lacking. And we have sort of made all those systems basically from the oil industry. We have this internal work environment systems where we have a lot of documentation, and it's sort of been something that a department over there is taking care of. And we need to take that back and to state clearly that work environment is about the work we are doing, and the experts on the work we are doing are the workers who is doing it, and the managers who is taking care of that and collaborating with the workers. And that has been a beneficial situation in the Nordic countries, because the workers has autonomy in the work, and also knowledge about how the work can be done in the best way. And we need to preserve that, and we need to have that dialogue on the lowest level possible. So we have to have engaged workers that discuss these things, and it's actually about the production. And if they succeed, you will have also higher, better results.
Einhverjar fleiri spurningar? No
Okay,
more questions?
thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Ég vil ekki bara taka okkur smá kaffipásu.